Today we're going to be mixing together Lunar Tides in the colors Smokey Teal with Magic Oracle. A little while ago, Lunar Tides posted a handful of different mixes that they suggested for their line on their Instagram. I like that they included ratios. So today we're going to try one called Sea Mist. And as a reminder, the Magic Oracle is a part of the black line from Lunar Tides. So I am predicting this to turn out quite dark. Also, you may notice that my swatches are labeled 1 through 12. I do just want to say that is not supposed to be synonymous with hair levels. They are truly just to keep track of each swatch throughout the video. 1 is pink, 2 is a cooler tone gray, 3 is a medium to darker natural red, and then 4 is black. 4 to 11 is a range that goes to platinum blonde, and then 12 is like a toned version of number 11. So I do use the swatches as is. I don't personally color them myself. So sometimes getting the range right can be a little bit difficult. I'm almost questioning if I should have put the 8 swatch between 6 and 7, but I don't know, when I do that it almost looks lighter than 7. I don't know. Almost a similar thing happening with 9 and 10. So I don't know, I might not have put these perfectly arranged. So I just suggest looking for which one you think looks the most similar to your hair and going from there. Also this time there wasn't a really good color to put between 10 and 11. It kind of jumps from here to here. I do apologize for that, but luckily this mix should be quite pigmented. So between 10 and 11 there shouldn't be a big difference. So if your hair is lighter than 10 but darker than 11, that I don't think it's going to be very different anyways. My swatches are not virgin hair, which means they've been chemically colored, treated, or bleached in their lifetimes. Now, normally what I do with my mix videos is I will do 2 to 3 different ratios depending on the colors that I have. So say it's like a pink and a blue, I could get like 2 to 3 different kinds of purple with that mix, which is why I will do 2 to 3 different ratios. This time the colors are pretty similar. The Magic Oracle is a little bit more green than the Smokey Teal and obviously a lot darker. So with the 5:1 ratio that is recommended, I don't think we can get much of a difference even if I changed the ratio. So today, for the first time in one of my like true mix videos, I'm gonna dilute the dye mixture instead of doing a second ratio with the colors, but we'll get there when we get there. So to start, I'm gonna take the mix and I will apply it to the very top of each swatch. And as a reminder, that is a 5:1 ratio. So 1 part of the Magic Oracle to 5 parts of Smokey Teal. And another reminder that everyone's hair is different. Everyone's hair will take color differently, plus different screens and monitors will make colors look different in terms of undertone usually. So please just use my video as a reference for how this could possibly maybe turn out for you. So the diluted section, this is going to be a little bit complicated to explain, but I think it'll be worth it. So we're still going to do our 5:1 ratio, and then we're going to double the amount of diluter that we use. So in this case, it's a 2:1 ratio. So 1 part of our mix to 2 parts of diluter. Now, I wasn't trying to do a whole math lesson today, but just in case, I don't want this to get too confusing for anyone, so go ahead and mute me if you don't want to hear the details, but I'm going to explain it for anyone who might need the extra explanation. So I'm going to use this spoon as a representation of our part. Imagine you're using this spoon to measure everything, your dye and your diluter. You're going to want to use 1 scoop of this for the Magic Oracle, 5 scoops of this for the Smokey Teal, and 12 scoops of this for your diluter. Now, it doesn't matter the size of whatever you use to measure. The amount of what you put in your bowl is going to give you a similar color. Now, if that's too complicated for you, truly, I would just take your 5-to-1 mixture and then add a little bit of diluter and swatch it on a paper towel or something just to see what the color looks like and go from there until you get something that you like. But for the sake of the video, I did want to measure it for you guys. And if you are wondering what diluter is, some brands like Lunar Tides do make diluters, which essentially is a clear version of the dye that you can use to mix with their pre-existing colors to lighten them. But to keep consistency between all of my videos, I actually just use a plain white conditioner as my diluter. All right, I'm gonna let this sit for I think like 2 hours to let it really absorb into the swatches. I will then rinse it out, and when it's dry, I will meet you back here. My only qualm with doing darker colors is that they are kind of hard to film. So I know on camera it probably looks super dark, which it is a darker color. Obviously we mixed it with black, but I apologize if it is difficult. There will be close-ups, which should be easier to see. Also, as a reminder, again, my swatches are not virgin hair. Virgin hair tends to be less porous, which means it can struggle to take and hold on to color. So doing something like this over virgin hair will get you probably a different result. But on the plus side, this is a pretty pigmented mix thanks to the black. But if you do want to try this on your hair, I would still recommend doing a strand test just in case. So number 1 was originally our pink swatch. I would say out of all of our swatches, that turned out to be the most cool tone. I'm going to assume that the pink helped to cancel out some of those greenish tones in the color to help get us this more cool tone blue. I mean, there's still definitely a tiny bit of warmth. It's just compared to these ones, it looks a lot more blue. I would put it in like a smoky blue category, I think. It has a lot of dustiness to it as well, which is really pretty. Overall, I would say all of these have a little bit of dustiness in them. The Smokey Teal on its own is a dusty dye, and then black has a tendency to come off a little bit dusty when you lighten it because it has those kind of grayish undertones. Not to say that this is super muted either, it's just not a super saturated version of a like darker teal color, but I would say with number 1 it is more on that muted side. 2 is our gray swatch. Surprisingly, on my swatch it's definitely a little bit warmer than like number 1, but even number 12, I actually see a little bit more green in the 2. Obviously though, the undertone of your gray will definitely change that. This version of my gray already had a slightly bluish undertone, so that probably played a role. But it does seem to be a little bit lighter than the like 11 and 12. Not by a lot, but it just seems like it didn't take it as deeply as these ones did. And it's also a little bit dustier as well. So for this video, I'm gonna group together 3, 5, and 6 because they all had a very similar turnout. I think 3 and 6 are technically a little bit more similar to each other, but overall, the darker half, the darker mix on the top essentially just makes the swatch look darker on the top. I do see a slight bit of like a greenish undertone coming through on the 6, a little bit less on the 3, again probably because of the warm reddish undertones canceling those out a little bit, but I don't really see a ton of color because it's so dark. And then the diluted sections for 3, 5, and 6 kind of look like more muted versions of what they were before. I guess 3 probably is the most different. That one has a little bit more of an ashy quality versus the 5 and the 6. You definitely lose the natural red in the 3, but it's really hard for me to put my finger on what I would call the color that turned out on number 3. It's almost like a dark, dark, dark ashy brown with just maybe the slightest hint of green. 5, interestingly, I think held its warmth a little bit better. Like the diluted section looks a little bit more brown than ash, like it does on number 3. And then number 6 took a little bit more of that green, but they all just kind of look, again, like super dark ashy browns maybe. 6, I guess, leans a little bit more on that green end though. And then 4 was our black swatch. I don't see a difference on there. I could also kind of group together 7, 8, and 9, but especially 7 and 8, they turned out really similar to each other. On both the top and the bottom for 7 and 8, it's super green. Not a lot of blue is really coming through at all. Obviously the top is darker than the bottom. Now, compared to like 9, 10, 11, and 12 sitting next to those, it looks like a warmer green, but I think on its own, it's still a pretty cool undertone green. But if you're looking for this mix to do over that depth of hair, like 7 or 8, I just wouldn't expect it to turn out blue if I were you. Basically, as the swatches get lighter between 9, 10, and 11, you start to lose that warmth a bit, with 11 being the least warm out of the natural colored swatches. So basically the most blue. And then interestingly, 12 goes back to having a little bit more warmth, sort of like the gray swatch, but again, it's a little bit darker than the gray swatch and a little less dusty. But again, the positive to this mix is that it is pretty pigmented. So if your hair isn't platinum blonde and you still like these kind of turnouts, you could have good luck with that. It just seems to be really like, we won't say that part, I guess. So as a reminder, the top half of the swatches are the recommended mix from Lunar Tides. On my swatches though, it turned out much darker than their preview. I think the bottom half actually looks a lot more similar to the preview or the picture like that I posted earlier in the video. The darker version would probably last a little bit longer and could potentially fade into something like this. So matter of preference as usual. All right, I tried zooming in and pulling my light back a little bit to see if that helps for the comparison portion of this video. So I will say, because of the dustiness of this color, which I keep saying that, I want you to know though, it's not a super dusty color. It's just comparing this to a lot of my other dyes, those look way more saturated in comparison to this. So both of my comparisons today are going to be Lunar Tides. I do have one dye that actually looks a lot like the bottom half for number 11. But the reason I am not including it in this video is because I'm afraid that it is being discontinued, and that is Colourpop in the color Turquoise. It has been on sale on the Colourpop website for months now. So I don't know if anyone's going to be able to get it anytime soon. So instead of including it in the video, I will take pictures of it and I will link that in the comment section so you can still see it, because I know right now, as of me filming this video, the dye is still available for purchase, but I don't know if it will be in the future. So for our first comparison, I think the most logical answer is to compare this to Smokey Teal. So again, Lunar Tides in the color Smokey Teal. This is comparable to number 12, 11, 10, and number 9. Obviously, the top mix is going to be much darker since we used a black to mix with it. So I'm going to move the swatches down and compare it to the bottom mix. I will say though, I do think this color on top is really beautiful. For the Lunar Tides, they don't really have a super dark teal like that, so it could be a good option if you're looking for something deeper with that kind of undertone. Now again, some of this is kind of hard to film for some reason, especially like turquoises are also really difficult to film because the camera always wants to correct it to be much more cool. But for the bottom mixture, you can see that the Smokey Teal on its own is a little bit darker and a little bit more cool. Again, that makes sense since the black that we were using had a slightly green undertone. I think it's especially obvious on 10 and 12. It looks a little bit more greenish in comparison. I think 9 as well, but the Smokey Teal over the 9 on its own already has a slightly more greenish look, but there's a difference there as well. It's a little bit harder to tell on the Platinum Blonde swatch. Even though there is a difference, I do still see a little bit more warmth in the 11. It's just not as dramatic. I'm assuming the fade is probably where you would see a difference, probably even more so. My favorite thing about it though, I would say, is even though I was saying that the black dye on its own is just going to be a little bit more smoky and not super saturated, it still did help this mix to be a little bit more saturated compared to like the diluted sections for the Smokey Teal. So I would say they both hold the same level of saturation, the Smokey Teal and our mix. But if you wanted a lighter version of the Smokey Teal, when you dilute it, it does get a little bit softer. Whereas with this, we were able to get it a little bit lighter and still maintain a little bit more saturation. I am also surprised at how cool in undertone the Smokey Teal looks, because you would think a teal would be a little bit more green, but it's a very, very pretty color. And I like both the mix and the dye on its own. I personally just think if you have like virgin hair or hair that's a little bit more stubborn, the mix would probably work a little bit better for you. But if you have lighter, like platinum blondish hair, then it's definitely a matter of preference. The next comparison, again, is Lunar Tides. This time it's in the color Cerulean Sea. So this is comparable to number 12, 11, 10, and 9. I mostly wanted this in here for anyone who is familiar with Lunar Tides and is familiar with Cerulean Sea. Now, I haven't done every single Lunar Tides color, so maybe there is a darker kind of teal color that I'm missing, but I'm pretty sure Cerulean Sea is probably the closest. And even with this, you can see, I feel like a lot of Lunar Tides colors do have a slight bit of softness to them. Some brands are really, really saturated, but even knowing that, the Cerulean Sea is definitely much more saturated in comparison. You can see, especially on the bottom mix, the softness now in comparison. So the Cerulean Sea is not as dark on its own, even though it is a little bit deeper. It's not as dark, and it's definitely much more green in comparison. And I feel like in terms of smokiness, you can probably especially see the difference on the 9 and 10 swatches, just how like muted and almost dusty those ones look in comparison. And I would say Cerulean Sea is another pretty pigmented color, but again, because this one is already on its own so green, if you don't like that, you run the risk of getting more greenish hair. But obviously, if you like that, it has a pretty good turnout, even on the slightly darker swatches. Yeah, overall, I would say this is a good mix to darken the Smokey Teal if you like it and warm it up a little bit. I am really curious now what the Oracle would look like with the Smoky Navy, since the Smoky Navy is a lot more cool in undertone. I wonder if you would get something like the Smoky Teal. An interesting thought. But now I would like to look at these in natural lighting. So we're going to do the before and after clips, and anything after this point in the video will also be natural lighting.
know I do. Fall into you. I fall into play it out, baby girl, I'm the riot. No doubt, baby, you got me wired. Thought I had it all figured out. 1 foot forward as
I hope my video helped. If you have a request, I do have a link below to a Google form you can fill out. Just remember, I only do brands that do not test on animals. Thank you so very much to my patrons, and thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video.